She said no again. I don't know why I kept expecting anything different. Maybe it was the way she smiled when she said it, like it didn't cost her anything. Like rejection came naturally to her, as if she was born fluent in it. I stood there in the half-light of her kitchen, pretending I didn't care. She laughed at something on her phone, a small sound, and it felt like she'd drawn a line through me without even looking. I told myself it was fine. I left quietly, same as always. The hallway outside her apartment smelled like dust and laundry detergent. I remember the click of the door behind me, the way it sounded lighter than I thought it should. I told myself I wouldn't ask again. Then I thought about her face when she looked at me, how her expression never really changed. It was polite, practiced. She'd been turning people down for a long time, I think. There was something efficient about it. The first time I asked her out, she said she was tired. The second time, she said she was busy. The third time, she just smiled, like it amused her that I hadn't figured it out yet. I tried to read something else in that smile, something softer, but there wasn't anything there. Just patience, maybe, or mild pity. She always seemed a step ahead, like she knew where every word would land before it left my mouth. I remember how she used to tuck her hair behind her ear when she spoke, a small gesture, almost mechanical. She never looked directly at me when I was serious, only when she wanted to diffuse something. I think that's what kept me coming back, the way she could neutralize a moment before it became dangerous. I mistook that for kindness. At night, I'd lie awake and replay our conversations, cutting them into fragments, listening for something I might have missed. A pause, a breath, something that meant I hadn't imagined it. I'd think about her hands resting on the counter, the chipped blue nail polish, the way she stood slightly off balance, as if ready to leave at any second. There was always motion in her, small, deliberate, economical. She never wasted a gesture. When I finally kissed her, she didn't move. She didn't pull away, but she didn't kiss me back either. Just a stillness, like she was waiting for something to pass. I stepped back and said sorry, though I wasn't. She said it was fine. But her tone had that lightness again, like she'd been through it before and knew exactly how it would end. After that, things didn't change. I still came by sometimes, pretending I had a reason. She never asked me to leave, which felt like permission. But permission isn't the same as interest. I started noticing small things, how she'd glance at the clock when I spoke, how her laughter sounded different when she was tired, how her voice dropped slightly when she wanted to make distance. These were details I collected, little proofs of reality. They made me feel closer to her even when I was in single quotes t. Once, I asked her what she wanted. She said she didn't know. I said I could wait. She smiled at that, a slow, faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. She said, "You always say that." I realized she was right. Waiting had become the only thing I was good at. I started bringing her coffee in the mornings. Sometimes she'd take it, sometimes she'd tell me not to bother. I pretended not to notice the pattern, but I did. On the days she took it, she drank half and left the rest on her desk. I'd watch the cup throughout the day, the way the surface darkened as it cooled. By afternoon, it looked dead. She dated other people. I didn't ask, but I knew. You can tell by the way someone's energy shifts. Her clothes changed slightly, sharper lines, more color. Her phone buzzed more. When she smiled, it felt like the smile belonged to someone else, like I was borrowing it. I tried to be gracious about it. I failed. There was one night when I stayed later than I should have. We were both drinking, not much, just enough to loosen the air. I told her I wanted her again. She said I didn't. She said I wanted to want her, and that wasn't the same thing. I asked what she meant, but she didn't answer. She turned off the light and told me I could sleep on the couch. I didn't. I left before sunrise. I started writing things down after that. Small notes about what she said, what she wore, how she moved. It wasn't deliberate at first, more like I needed to prove the nights happened. Otherwise they blurred together. I'd find myself wondering if I'd misremembered something. I'd check the notes and feel better. I told myself it wasn't obsession, just observation. People confuse the two. Obsession is when you act on it. Observation is when you notice too much. I was still quiet, still polite. I didn't touch her again. I didn't raise my voice. I just watched the small ways she drifted through her days. How she made rejection look almost graceful. She once said she didn't want to hurt me. I told her she couldn't. I thought that sounded strong at the time. Now it just sounds stupid. Of course she could. She already had, just not in the way I expected. There's a kind of pain that doesn't announce itself. It just settles in, makes a home. I remember one evening, the last before everything shifted. She was sitting on her balcony, smoking, wrapped in an old sweater. The city below was quiet, washed out by the orange streetlights. I asked if she'd ever thought about leaving. She said no. Everything she needed was here. I asked if that included me. She didn't answer. She just looked out into the dark and said, "You always ask the wrong kind of question." I didn't see her for a while after that. She stopped replying to messages. I told myself she was busy, that people get tired. But the truth sat there in the silence. She was finished. Not angry, not cruel, just done. I should have respected that. Instead, I kept thinking about how easily she'd closed the door on me. How smooth her exits always were. When she finally called again, months later, she sounded different, lighter. She said she'd been seeing someone. I said I was happy for her. I wasn't, but I said it cleanly. She said she wanted to stay friends. I said sure. We both knew what that meant. She told me to come by sometime. I said I would. I didn't. I thought I'd moved on. I even dated someone else for a while, but every conversation felt like rehearsal. I kept comparing them, gestures, tones, the way their eyes moved when they lied. None of it matched. I realized I wasn't missing her exactly. I was missing the way she made me feel like I was on the edge of something I couldn't name. Years passed like that. Small, quiet, forgettable years. Then one day, I saw her again. In a lobby. I was there for a meeting. She was there with a man, tall, sharp suit, expensive watch. Her boss, I think. She looked happy. The kind of happy that doesn't need explaining. She recognized me immediately. And for a second, something flickered in her eyes. Then her boss smiled and said, "Oh, you're her ex." My wife froze. She hadn't told him, apparently. She froze, and I saw it, that same quiet panic, the small crack in her calm. I smiled and said, from this moment on. She didn't say anything. Just watched me walk away. I could feel her staring, but I didn't look back. After that day in the lobby, I didn't see her for a while. I didn't expect to. People like her don't linger in the same spaces after being exposed. She was always careful about her exits, always made them seem natural. But I started noticing her again in small ways, not her exactly, but traces. Her name in an email thread, a photo from a company event someone posted. She looked the same, maybe softer around the edges, but there was something in her posture, a kind of vigilance. It suited her. I didn't plan to keep track of her. It just happened. You start noticing patterns without meaning to. The way people mark time. She left her apartment most mornings around 7:30. Sometimes earlier if it was raining. She always carried the same black bag. Her hair tied back, efficient, not styled for anyone. I'd see her pass by the same cafe near the train station. She never went in. I wondered if she avoided it because it was too familiar, or because it reminded her of someone. There's a difference between curiosity and fixation. Curiosity fades when you get an answer. Fixation doesn't. It just shifts shape until it feels natural. I told myself I was just curious. I told myself that often. I began keeping track of when she turned on her lights at night, how long they stayed on, what time they went off. I knew which windows were hers, third floor, second from the right. She had a habit of leaving the curtains half closed, enough to make the light spill out like it wanted to escape. Sometimes I'd see her silhouette move past, brief and soft, like memory replayed through glass. I never stayed long, just long enough to remind myself she was still there. People think obsession feels like heat, like fire. It doesn't. It's cold. It's the slow narrowing of everything until only one detail matters. The rest of the world goes quiet. I saw her once on a Sunday morning. She was walking with that same man, her boss, maybe more now. They didn't touch, but there was something practiced in the distance between them, like they'd already calculated what could be seen. She laughed once, that short, contained sound I remembered. He didn't. He looked at her like she was something he'd already figured out. I wondered if she liked that. After that, I started to notice the rhythm of her life. Mondays she worked late. Tuesdays she ordered takeout. Wednesdays she came home early and opened the window for a while. Sometimes I could hear faint music when I walked past, nothing distinct, just a steady pulse. Thursdays she disappeared for hours. Fridays she left town, sometimes, always with a small suitcase. I wondered if she told him where she went. I never followed. That would have made it real. I just noticed, from a distance, like reading a story I already knew the ending to. It wasn't about control or revenge. It was about symmetry. She had spent so long being unreadable, keeping her life just out of reach. Now, I could read it quietly. She didn't know, and that made it cleaner. Once, she passed near me on the street. I didn't think she saw me, but she hesitated, just a flicker, and her eyes moved across the crowd like she felt something out of place. I turned slightly, pretended to check my phone. When she looked away, I watched her keep walking. She didn't look back again. I started dreaming about her apartment. Not her, just the space, the couch, the balcony, the corner where she used to keep her plants. I'd wake up and imagine the quiet there, the still air, the way her presence lingered even after she left. Sometimes I'd write down what I thought she might be doing at that exact moment. It wasn't fantasy. It was routine. I kept the notes folded inside an old notebook. I never reread them. I just liked knowing they existed. People assume fixation leads to confrontation. It doesn't have to. There's a kind of peace in just knowing, in being the silent witness. The trick is to keep your emotions flat, let everything blur at the edges. I became good at that. The more I knew about her days, the less I felt about them. It turned into data. Movements, timings, patterns. She became predictable. Predictable things are safe. Months passed like that. Quiet, clean, unremarkable. I kept my distance. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of her reflection in a window or a passing car, and it would startle me, not because she looked different, but because she didn't. I'd half expect her to have changed completely, like people do in dreams. But she was still her. Still careful, still composed, still slightly removed from everything around her. One evening, I saw her coming home late. She looked tired. The man wasn't with her. She unlocked her door, paused for a moment, then went inside. The light came on a few minutes later. She moved through the apartment slowly, deliberate. I stood across the street, watching the outline of her shadow cross the room. For a second, I thought she turned toward the window. My heart didn't even move, just a steady beat, calm, detached. Then the lights went out. After that, she changed her routine slightly. Different routes, different hours. Subtle, but enough to notice. Maybe she'd felt something that night. A shift in the air. People have instincts about being seen. They don't always know where it comes from, just that something's wrong. I wondered if she felt that wrongness now. I didn't stop. I just adjusted. The point wasn't to interfere, only to observe. I started writing less. There wasn't much need to record. She'd settled into a life that seemed stable, maybe happy. The man was still around. I'd see them occasionally, distant, quiet. He looked like the kind of person who preferred control over affection. I wondered if she recognized that, or if it made her feel safe. Some people mistake control for care. At night, I'd sit by the window and think about the way she used to laugh. Not the sound itself, but the rhythm, short, contained, practiced. It was a signal, a way of keeping people comfortable while staying untouchable. I used to think I could break through that. Now I realized it wasn't a wall. It was her. The distance was her nature. Sometimes I thought about what I'd say if she saw me again. Maybe nothing. Maybe just her name, said once, softly. But the truth is, I didn't want to talk. Words ruined the quiet. I preferred the version of her that existed in silence, the one I could watch without consequence. I started noticing smaller details, the flicker of her television, the shape of her shadow when she crossed the living room, the pause before she turned off the lights. It became a language of movement, and I learned it by heart. Each gesture meant something, even if she didn't know it. There's a kind of devotion in stillness. You don't have to touch something to own the memory of it. I began to feel that I'd reached the purest form of knowing her, not through conversation or intimacy, but through observation stripped of need. She existed, and I witnessed. That was enough. Once, I saw her standing on her balcony again. It reminded me of that night years ago, when I'd asked if she'd ever thought about leaving. She was older now, a little slower in her movements. But her posture was the same, that quiet self-containment. She leaned against the railing, looking out over the city, and for a brief second, I thought she might look my way. She didn't. She turned and went back inside. After that, I stopped keeping track of the times. The lists, the notes, they didn't matter anymore. She'd become constant, something fixed in the background. I could go days without thinking about her, and then suddenly, she'd appear in my mind like a reflection catching light. No warning, no reason. Just there. I realized I didn't want anything from her anymore. Not love, not conversation, not even acknowledgement. I just wanted to know that she continued to exist somewhere nearby. That was enough. Sometimes, late at night, I'd wonder if she ever thought about me. Not in detail, just as a faint outline, the way you think of an old song you haven't heard in years. I hope she didn't. It's better that way. Some connections only make sense in silence. When I think back now, I can't pinpoint when the fixation started or ended. It just shifted form, from desire to observation to something quieter still. A kind of acceptance, maybe. Or indifference disguised as peace. The world kept moving around her. New people, new places. But she remained the same in my mind, a still frame, preserved in light. Sometimes that's all you can ask for. It's been months since I last saw her move behind those curtains. I tell myself she changed apartments. People do that when the air in a place starts to feel used. But sometimes, when the light hits the windows just right, I think I still see her outline. It's probably someone else. I don't check. I just let the thought pass. The quiet has become its own pattern. I wake before dawn, make coffee, sit by the window. The city hums in the distance, the kind of low sound that fills everything without asking permission. I like the hours before anyone else wakes. It's when the world feels most honest, just machinery and light. I don't keep notes anymore. There's nothing left to document. The rituals stopped meaning anything once I understood what they were for. They weren't about her. They were about the gap she left. The routine kept the gap measured, predictable. When you stop measuring, it becomes infinite. Sometimes I still walk past her old street. The cafe near the train station changed owners. The sign is new. The smell is different. I don't stop. I just glance once, long enough to confirm that the world has continued. Continuation is its own kind of mercy. I heard she moved to another office. Different division, different boss. I don't know if that's true. Rumors fill the spaces where facts used to live. That's how people keep their stories alive, by letting them blur. The last real image I have of her is that morning light on her face, the day everything ended. Her expression when I said those words, from this moment on. Shock, yes, but something else too. Relief, maybe? The relief of recognition. As if she'd finally understood that my wanting her had never really been about her. Just about the silence she carried wherever she went. Now, when I think of her, it isn't memory exactly. It's more like the echo of a room after someone has left. The air still shaped by their absence. I used to imagine she'd remember me in the same way, faint but persistent. Lately I doubt it. People like her erase gently. They don't leave space for ghosts. Once, a few weeks ago, I dreamed she was standing on a beach. She turned, looked at me, said something I couldn't hear. Her lips moved slowly, as if underwater. When I woke, the words were gone. Only the rhythm remained. It sounded like goodbye. I think she's happy now. I have no proof. Happiness isn't something you can measure from a distance, but there's a calm that settles when the world stops asking for your attention. I imagine that calm suits her. Sometimes, when the night is quiet enough, I speak her name once, just to hear it exist in the room again. The sound feels foreign now, like it belongs to another language. I don't linger on it. It fades quickly. She wake tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe she already has, in some new apartment where the light falls differently. She stand by the window, sip her coffee, sense something small and misplaced in the air. Not fear, not danger, just the faint wrongness of a memory shifting. She look out, scanning the street, then shrug, close the curtain, move on. I'll be somewhere else by then. A different street, a different window, same silence. Watching nothing in particular. Just the stillness between movements, the ordinary weight of time. The world continues. That's all it ever does. And in that continuation, there's a kind of peace. No triumph, no loss. Just the soft sound of distance holding steady.